There is a road on the outskirts of Sleepy Hollow that no longer appears on any map. It surfaces only on Halloween night. Anyone who drives down that road never returns. Only the stench of gasoline and burnt leather lingers in the wind. They say, if you ever hear an engine rumbling in the dark, don't turn around. Because the driver before you is still sitting behind the wheel. Nis, me. Fog smothered Sleepy Hollow so thick that every light turned to a dull blur. Halloween night was alive with laughter, pale masks, and cheap costumes glowing under street lamps. Yet, among the noise and color, Nolan Graves moved like a shadow. He hadn't come for the festival, but for an old newspaper headline from 1993. 6 cars vanish on an unnamed road, engines still running till morning. 30 years had passed, and the mystery had never been solved. The town tried to forget, but the faint scent of gasoline still clung to the air, as if it had never left. Along the cobblestone streets, people hung pumpkin lanterns and paper ghosts, but behind their windows, Nolan could feel cautious eyes watching. The name Hollow Road was still spoken only in whispers. Inside the town's old library, he sifted through decaying archives. The pages were brittle, the ink fading beneath the weight of time. A 1992 map marked a narrow route leading west into the forest, Hollow Road. On the town's current map, that route had vanished, replaced by a white void, as if it had been carved out with a knife. In the margin of one page, scrawled in pencil, was a note, "Do not turn on the headlights." Outside, a thin drizzle began to fall. Nolan walked back toward his rented room, passing moss-covered houses, where the wind moaned through chimneys like the sighs of something that did not wish to be awakened. At the last intersection, he paused. An old gas station still burned a single trembling yellow light. An elderly man sat beside a rusted pump, his eyes hollow as if they had seen too much. When Nolan approached, the man merely glanced up, saying nothing. Only the rattle of wind through tin and the dull clang of metal echoed between them. Then, from somewhere beyond the edge of sight, Nolan sensed movement. A sound low and distant, like an engine turning over in the dark. It wasn't coming from the main road, but from the forest, where the map turned blank. The noise sputtered, lingered, then faded, leaving behind the faint, acrid smell of burnt rubber in the damp air. Back in his room, Nolan opened his laptop and began to type the first line of his article. There are roads that only appear when no one is meant to see them. The cursor blinked, slow, steady, like a pulse. It reflected his weary face, hollow-eyed yet fixed on the darkness beyond the window. The fog was thickening. Somewhere out there, among the moldy hills, an engine was humming again. Steady, rhythmic, like the breath of something that had never stopped. When the clock struck 11:10 p.m., Nolan rose. The map lay open on the desk, a red circle drawn around the western woods, like an eye watching him back. He slipped the recorder into his jacket, locked the door, and stepped into the street. In the distance, the fog swallowed the horizon, as if all of Sleepy Hollow were dissolving into its own nightmare. Ibidi. The room he rented sat above an old tavern, its walls soaked in smoke and mildew. Through the window, Nolan Graves could see the western woods, where the night fog curled like the breath of something waiting to exhale. He sat at the desk, surrounded by flickering lamplight and scattered notes, yellowed articles, torn maps, fragments of local testimony, all forming a distorted mosaic whose center was a single missing road, erased from every official record. He switched on his recorder. His gravelly voice filled the silence, each word sounding less like research notes and more like confession. Years ago, he had written about places that didn't exist, crime scenes that the police refused to acknowledge. But this felt different. Something in Sleepy Hollow was calling him, as though the story hadn't chosen him by chance, but the road itself had summoned him. A small photograph rested on the desk. Martha, his late wife, smiling faintly in a frame smudged with dust. She had died in a car crash 5 years ago, on a rain-slick highway not unlike the one he was about to find. In the trembling light, her face faded, then vanished completely when the lamp flickered. Nolan's eyes lingered there, guilt rising with the whistle of wind through the cracked window. Memories flooded back, the nights she begged him to stop, the mornings he left chasing truths. And now, once again, he was preparing to drive toward what everyone else had learned to avoid. The clock read 11:37. Outside, the last echoes of Halloween faded, leaving only the hush of rain tapping gently on the tin roof. Nolan closed his notebook, checked his camera, flashlight, and the old town map. His phone's GPS showed nothing, a blank screen and a weak signal icon. But when he set it down on the desk, the display suddenly flickered to life. A thin line appeared, faint, trembling, unnamed, leading straight into the western forest. He stared at it as blurry words emerged from the haze. Hollow Road. The recorder on the table clicked on by itself, playing a low, steady rumble, the sound of an idling engine. The same rhythm he'd heard the night before. But there was no tape inside. No reason it should be playing at all. Nolan rose. His pulse raced, yet his eyes were steady. Curiosity had long since drowned out fear. He slipped on his jacket, gathered his gear, and descended the damp staircase. Outside, the wind whipped the fog into ghostly sheets that rolled across the street like a pale shroud spreading over the town. When he turned the key, the engine growled awake. The clock on the dashboard read 11:47 p.m. On the GPS screen, the phantom line glowed. A road with no name, winding deep into the black forest. Nolan drove toward it, unaware that behind him, the light in his rented room kept flickering, as if someone were still sitting there, watching him leave. Oh! The road out of town narrowed, hemmed in by crooked trees draped in wet moss. Nolan Graves drove slowly, tires crunching over gravel slick with rotting leaves. Ahead, the fog was so dense that his headlights became nothing more than two faint yellow orbs in a sea of white. No signs, no streetlights, no GPS signal. Only the steady hum of the engine echoing through a boundless, soundless dark. He gripped the wheel tighter, eyes straining to pierce the haze. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. The clock on the dashboard read 11:58. He blinked. When his eyes opened again, it read 11:12. Another blink, 10:46. A chill climbed his spine like cold electricity. He reset the dashboard clock, but the hands refused to move. Outside, the fog churned, thickening as though the road were devouring its own light. There was nothing now but the engine's rhythm, until, between the silences, came another sound. Another engine, deeper, rougher, somewhere ahead. Nolan slowed, peering through the glass. In the fog, a flicker of red, taillights. Another car. He accelerated, closing the distance to only a few yards. And then, without warning, the lights vanished, dissolved into the air as if they had never been there. He stopped, killed the engine, listened. The fog was absolute silence. When he opened the door, cold moisture filled his lungs, carrying the acrid tang of gasoline and burned rubber. On the road, tire tracks, slick and fresh. But they stopped abruptly a few meters ahead, ending in emptiness. Nolan crouched, fingertips brushing the cold gravel, feeling the presence of someone who had been there only moments before. From the mist, a shape emerged, a rusted, crooked road sign. The letters were nearly gone, buried under grime. He wiped away the filth with his sleeve. In the beam of his flashlight, 2 words appeared: Hollow Road. Beneath them, a single handprint, faint, pressed deep into the dust, as though someone had clawed at the sign before disappearing. The wind rose, pushing the fog into swirling columns that whispered like human voices. Nolan turned back to the car, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to leave, but something darker inside, something he'd carried for years, urged him onward. He started the engine. The tires rolled forward over wet gravel, each turn groaning like a sigh. For a fleeting moment, the fog thinned, and in that fragile gap, he saw them. Cars, dozens of them, parked on both sides of the road. Engines running, headlights burning, doors open. No drivers, no movement. Only the synchronized hum of machinery, engines droning in perfect rhythm, a mechanical choir, breathing gasoline and despair. Nolan froze, eyes wide, as the fog surged again, swallowing the lights one by one. Only the sound remained, the endless mechanical heartbeat merging with his own. In his trembling hand, the recorder buzzed to life, unprompted. It played back a voice, his own from the night before. There are roads that only appear when no one is meant to see them. The fog closed in from every direction, and for the first time, Nolan wasn't sure if he was still in the night, or trapped inside the memory of someone who had already vanished. Nudie. The night fog had thickened into something like wet cement, swallowing the beams of Nolan Graves' headlights within a few feet. He no longer knew where he was. The road twisted endlessly ahead, stripped of signs, homes, or sound. Only rows of dead trees lined either side, like silent witnesses to an execution long foreseen. His car shuddered intermittently, the engine growling low and uneven. The fuel gauge dropped faster than it should. Nolan glanced at the dashboard. It was past midnight. He decided to stop, stepping out into the cold, letting the damp air stab at his face. The air carried the stench of burnt gasoline, damp metal, and something faintly sweet, like roasted flesh, the smell that had haunted him since the accident he'd covered a decade ago. Something glowed faintly through the haze, headlights. He moved closer. A vintage Chevy Impala sat motionless in the middle of the road, engine idling steadily. The driver's door hung open. The cabin lights flickered, casting a weak yellow pulse across the scratched dashboard. On the passenger seat lay a torn paper map, dot-dot. Nolan picked it up. The roads were drawn by hand, crude and shaky. Across the center, written in smeared ink, "Turn back before the hum stops." He turned toward his own car and froze. Behind him, deeper in the fog, more lights appeared. One pair, then another, then another. Headlights blooming in the mist, aligning like eyes staring straight at him. There was no sound of engines, yet the glow grew harsher, blinding. Squinting, Nolan realized each vehicle was running, but none had a driver. The sound came all at once, engines revving, howling, rising to a deafening roar. The ground trembled beneath his feet. It was as if the road itself had come alive. Nolan stumbled backward, slipping into a ditch of freezing water. From the fog, an old Ford shot past him, missing by inches, empty. Its windshield was opaque with grime, reflecting his own terrified face before vanishing into the white smoke without a trace. He understood then. He was surrounded by them, an entire procession of ghostly cars, engines growling, brakes hissing, accelerators roaring with no one behind the wheels. Each license plate bore a different year: 1993, 2001, 2014. These were the drivers who had entered Hollow Road and never come back. The radio inside Nolan's car suddenly crackled to life. A man's voice whispered, soft and deliberate. "You shouldn't have come here, Nolan." He sprinted back, slammed the door, heart hammering against his ribs. But when he looked into the rearview mirror, his breath caught. Someone was sitting in the back seat, faint, motionless, staring out the window. No face, no movement. Only the blurred outline of a half-burned coat. The engine roared on its own. The speedometer needle began to spin. The radio hissed with a jumble of voices, dozens of them, layered and overlapping, whispering and wailing in static, the sound of every soul trapped on this cursed road. Nolan screamed, yanking the gear shift, but the car refused to obey. The headlights surged to full brightness, blinding white, and in that fleeting flash he saw them ahead. Dozens of driverless cars, perfectly aligned, engines roaring in unison. They were waiting for him. The hollow road screamed like a living machine, its chorus of engines rising to a single monstrous howl, and at its center, Nolan Graves was simply next in line. "Now, ye, and ease in my eyes." The night wind sighed through the trees, like the breath of something that had lingered here too long. The fog hadn't lifted, it only thickened, heavier and colder. Nolan Graves sat behind the wheel, his hands clenched tight. The engine started on its own. He hadn't touched the keys. Its rhythm was steady, not the mechanical hum of a car, but the heartbeat of the road itself, of something alive beneath the black asphalt. On the windshield, the fog gathered into the shape of a hand. It slid down slowly, leaving a trail of frost behind. Nolan froze. He glanced at the passenger seat, empty. But in the rearview mirror, the faceless man sat in the back seat, his head tilted, staring out the window. The road ahead stretched into infinity, no beginning, no end. The headlights of dozens of cars flickered in the mist like candles on a grave. Then the radio crackled. The static shifted. A voice came through, old, distant, familiar. On Halloween night, 1993, 6 drivers vanished. None were ever found. But when police arrived, their engines were still running. It was his own voice, his broadcast from over 30 years ago. Nolan tried to scream, but his throat locked tight, the sound escaping only as a dry rasp. The speedometer began to rise on its own, 20, 40, 70 miles an hour. The car surged forward. Along both sides of the road, the ghostly cars moved in unison, forming a funeral procession of steel, all heading toward the heart of the fog, where even light could not survive. A whisper came, unclear whether from the radio or from inside his head. Every road leads somewhere. The question is, who's driving? The figure in the back seat vanished. But in the front seats of the other cars, faces began to appear, blurred, half-burned, half-faded. Nolan knew them. Every one of them. Victims of the Hollow Road. Names he had once written in his reports, now staring back at him through the mist. His car stopped suddenly. The odometer spun backward. The lights went out. Silence fell, except for the steady hum of an engine still running somewhere in the dark. Me! At dawn, a patrol car discovered a silver sedan parked in the middle of sleepy Hollow Road. The engine was still running. Headlights still on. Doors opened. No driver inside. On the passenger seat lay a weathered leather notebook. The last line, scrawled in trembling handwriting, read, "Turn back before the hum stops." One officer reached in and turned the key. The engine died with a soft sigh. And in that moment, from deep within the fog, they heard another engine start, steady, cold, echoing far beyond sight. The road was empty. But the Hollow Road had never truly stopped. Tiens. In a wooden house on the edge of the Louisiana woods, the scent of wax and smoke mingled with something else, sweeter, yet more metallic. People still bought his candles every Halloween, saying they burned long, glowed softly, and smelled like their lost loved ones. One year, the candle maker burned to death in his own workshop. When the police cleared the scene, they counted more than 30 candles still burning, each one carved with the name of someone from the town. No, power. The town of Belchene nestled beside the Louisiana swamps, where the mornings were thick with mist and the evenings heavy with damp decay. Each autumn, fog lingered until noon, cloaking the weathered wooden roofs and rusted fences. Along the dirt road leading to the edge of the woods stood an old house with a sagging porch, its only light coming from dozens of flickering candles behind the window panes. The townsfolk called it Moreau's Candle Workshop. Elias Moreau had lived there for nearly 20 years. He rarely left his home, appearing only a few times each month, carrying a basket of candles wrapped in brown cloth to deliver to the store in town. People said he was the last person who still knew how to make candles by hand, the old way, using beeswax and the formulas long forgotten. Some even swore that Elias's candles not only burned longer, but also gave off a sweet, untraceable scent, like the smell of memory itself. Inside the house, Elias worked in silence. The narrow room was filled with wooden shelves dusted in wax, and candle wicks hung from hooks like dried cords. The pale yellow light danced on the walls, casting warped shadows that moved to the rhythm of the flames. He moved slowly, hands trembling as he stirred the hot wax, his eyes lost in the rising haze. The air was thick with wax, smoke, and something else, sweeter, sharper, clinging to his hair and clothes. On the old wooden table, among dozens of human-shaped candle molds, lay a small photograph. A young woman and a little boy standing beside a lake, their smiles blurred by time. Next to the photo, 2 candles carved with the names Marie and Julianne burned every night, though Elias never replaced the wicks, he said. Or perhaps only whispered to himself that the light kept them close. Outside, the swamp murmured its familiar sounds. The buzz of insects, the drip of water, the wind weaving through the old oaks. Each night, the town was left with only the glow from Elias's candles, trembling across the still surface of the water like a golden shiver. People said that if you passed by his house at midnight, you could hear faint murmurs, like prayers or voices answering from within the fire. Elias Moreau lived between light and shadow, between the scent of wax and the weight of memory. To the town, he was a harmless eccentric, but to himself, he was the keeper of candles and of the souls
Did you hear
that
what happened
refused to
down by
leave.
the river?
And
I heard they found another one. It must be
that
a
year,
curse.
Halloween came earlier
We
than
cannot stay
usual.
here.
The
It is
fog
not
still
safe.
clung thickly to the town
Where
of
else can we
Belshan,
go?
but the
They
air
are
itself
everywhere.
seemed heavier, saturated with a strange scent that drifted through every house and narrow alley. People said the wind carried it from the direction of the swamp, from beneath the old forest canopy where Elias Moreau's house stood hidden. At Clara Dubois General Store, Elias's candles were always the best sellers. They sat on a separate shelf, wrapped in brown
Be careful
paper
what you
and
say.
tied with coarse
The walls
twine.
have ears tonight.
When lit,
I understand.
their glow wasn't a
We will
harsh
speak
yellow, but a
later.
soft amber, like the last light of sunset. A light that made the whole room feel warmer. But this time, customers said something was different. The light was still beautiful, yet the scent was unsettling. Sweet, heavy, and beneath the melting wax lingered a faint trace, like human skin that had just met fire. Rumors spread, as they always did in small towns. Some claimed Elias's candles were enchanted, that if you burned one on Halloween night, you could feel the presence of a departed loved one returning. Clara heard the gossip and thought of her mother, who had passed away that summer. On a rainy night, she lit a candle from the new batch. The golden light fell upon the framed photograph on her shelf. She smelled jasmine, her mother's favorite perfume, and for a fleeting moment, Clara thought she heard footsteps creaking across the old wooden floor. The next morning, stories like hers filled the town. Someone said their candle's wax melted into the shape of a face. Another swore they heard whispers from within the flame. Sheriff Clay Benoit, long accustomed to Belshan superstitions, began to take notice when that strange scent followed him all the way back to his office. He knew only one man in the parish still made candles by hand, Elias Moreau. Meanwhile, inside the wooden house, Elias kept working, unaware of the whispers spreading beyond the trees. He mixed wax, poured it into molds, his hands darkened by soot. Each time a candle hardened, he carved a name into it. Sometimes someone from town, sometimes a name he had only just recalled from a dream. In the flickering light, the lines on his face deepened, as if his skin itself had been molded from wax. When night fell, that scent returned again, seeping into the fog, carried by the wind, slipping through cracks in doors and windows. Those who had ever burned one of Elias's candles said the flames never truly went out, even when doused with water. Some said it was the candlemaker's gift. Others whispered that the candles burned brighter each time someone in town went missing. Ah. 3 days after the rumors swept through Belchene, Sheriff Clay Benoit decided to visit the home of Elias Moreau. A light rain was falling, and the sky hung low and gray, the color of melted wax. The dirt road through the swamp was slick, reeking of moss, rot, and the carcasses of animals trapped too long in the water. From a distance, Benoit saw the old wooden house with its familiar faint glow through the window, a light that never went out. As he drew closer, the smell hit him, that same sweet, metallic scent, only stronger now. The scent of Elias's candles. But this time, it no longer carried warmth. It was the sour breath of something decaying. The door stood ajar, and through the crack Benoit saw hundreds of half-burned candles. Their flames danced wildly, casting twisted shadows that crawled across the walls. Inside, the workshop looked like a chapel of fire. Dozens of wooden racks were piled high with molds, candle wicks and glass jars filled with thick, murky liquid. On the work table, small human-shaped candles stood in neat rows, each one eerily detailed. Wrinkles on the brow, a scar on the lip, eyelids gently closed. Every figure bore a name carved at its base. Benoit recognized some of them, people who had disappeared from Belchene over the years. A chill ran down his spine. In the corner of the room, one floorboard sat slightly raised. When he pressed down, a hollow sound echoed beneath it. A small hatch covered with an old iron plate. From below came a wave of heat and a stench, sharp and acrid, like wax mixed with burnt flesh. Benoit pried the hatch open and descended. The wooden steps creaked under his boots, leading into a low, narrow cellar barely tall enough for him to stoop through. The light from his oil lantern flickered against rows of glass jars lining the walls. Inside each jar floated a cloudy, waxy substance, within which were bits that hadn't fully dissolved. Strands of hair, pieces of nail, sometimes what looked like a small bone fragment. In the center of the cellar sat a massive copper cauldron, embers still glowing faintly beneath it. On its rim, half hidden by soot, were the words etched in Latin. Lux in carne, light within flesh. Behind the cauldron lay a thick, charred notebook, its first pages written in a neat, slanted hand. Benoit recognized Elias' writing. They say light is salvation. I only help them stay. When flesh and soul are cast as one, the flame remembers in their stead. Ah! The later pages were stained with wax, listing names, batches of candles, and notes scrawled beside them. Fat, pure enough. Scent aligned. Soul not yet departed. Benoit stood frozen, hearing only the pounding of his own heart. Then, from above, came a faint sound. Slow, dragging footsteps. The lantern flame quivered, throwing trembling light onto the damp wall. Something moved in the darkness. A figure of wax, half melted, half whole, its hollow sockets glinting with reflected fire. A cold wind rushed through the cellar. The lantern went out. In the suffocating dark, Benoit felt dozens of unseen eyes upon him. Not the eyes of the living, but of souls imprisoned in the light of candles. On the floor near his feet, a new candle burned, its flame small and pale blue, trembling like breath. On its body, freshly carved into soft wax, was a single name. Clay Benoit. That Halloween night, The town of Belshen lay beneath a fog so thick that even the streetlights were reduced to dim, wavering orbs. No one could recall when the sky had begun to darken, only that the chill had come earlier than usual, and the scent of burning wax drifted through the air like an omen. From the church to the town square, candles were lit in preparation for the midnight procession. Most of them were Elias Moreau's, smooth, fragrant, and burning with an unnervingly steady flame. As the light spread, Belshen shimmered in a warm golden glow, as if the entire town had been gathered into a single gentle embrace of light. But a few noticed something strange. Every candle gave off a different scent. Some smelled faintly of tobacco. Others carried the familiar fragrance of someone long gone. One person began to cry without knowing why. At the edge of town, Elias's wooden house blazed with light. Inside, he had arranged hundreds of candles around the workshop, each one carved with a name, a face, a memory. Old memorial candles, new commissions, forgotten orders, all were lit. Flames danced on the walls, where the shadows of people seemed to stir within the trembling glow. Elias, dressed in a wax-stained cloak, stood at the center of the inferno. His face was pale, his eyes hollow as caverns. He murmured words from his old notebook, his voice merging with the hiss and pop of the candles. The light keeps them near. The light never dies. Beshi, Wenbenga, Oka. Thick waves of smoke curled upward, gliding across the ceiling and brushing against the photo frames hidden in the dark. Portraits of his wife, his son, and dozens of others from the town. All of them arranged neatly, all gazing toward the great cauldron of boiling wax. Outside, Sheriff Clay Benoit stood on the porch, clutching his oil lamp. He had returned after 3 sleepless days since discovering the cellar, haunted by what he'd seen. From where he stood, the light inside seemed alive, twisting and breathing, and through the smoke he could hear whispers, like voices calling from the fire. There was no longer any doubt. Elias was completing his ritual. The door burst open, spewing a wave of blistering smoke. Benoit saw Elias kneeling in the middle of the room, hands raised in prayer, surrounded by candles that reached his chest, their flames glowing in eerie blue. Beneath him, the melted wax flowed into a perfect circle, spreading like blood. The walls trembled. The human-shaped candles began to soften, their faces melting, merging into one vast, blinding mass of light. The fire spread faster than Benoit could move. He stumbled back as the wind from the swamp howled through, tearing at the roof. The wood cracked and screamed, and the house erupted in a single roar of flame. Inside, Elias did not move. His eyes reflected the inferno, and just before the fire consumed him, he smiled. The people of Belshen saw the column of smoke rising from the edge of town, thick, black, and heavy as sin. They rushed into the streets, thinking it an accident, but none dared approach. The fire burned through the night, unquenchable, immune even to the rain. When dawn came, nothing remained but the charred skeleton of the house and a thin layer of hardened wax coating the earth, smooth and pale as skin. No one ever found the body of Elias Moreau. Only ashes, shards of broken molds, and the lingering sweet, acrid scent that never left the swamp. Nanorni. 2 weeks after the fire, Belshen slowly returned to its familiar quiet. The autumn wind carried the damp breath of the swamp, settling a new layer of green moss across rooftops. No one spoke the name Elias Moreau anymore, though his burned house still stood like a scar in the middle of the blackened clearing, a wound that refused to heal. The police called the fire an accident caused by gas pressure, a polite way of describing something they couldn't explain. But Sheriff Clay Benoit knew better. On sleepless nights, he still caught the scent of burning wax, sweet and metallic, seeping through his window even when the wind blew the other way. When the townsfolk cleared the ruins, they found 30 candles, untouched amid the ashes. They had not melted, though the house around them had burned to nothing. Each candle bore a name, the names of Belchane's residents, living and dead alike. The candles were brought to the church and sealed inside a wooden chest. But that night, the priest swore the inside of the chest began to glow, and the candles burned on their own, though no hand had lit them. A year later, on Halloween night, the fog returned. Up on the southern hill, among the gravestones, people saw faint blue lights flickering between the crosses, candles burning without wicks, without wax, without wind. Children said they heard soft singing among the trees, voices whispering their names from the dark. Sheriff Benoit grew old. His hair turned silver, his eyes dimmed. In his desk drawer, he still kept one of Elias's candles, a gift from long ago. He'd tried to throw it away many times, yet each time he opened the drawer, it was there again, cold as stone, the name Clay Benoit still carved into its body. Sometimes, when he was tired, a faint light would pulse from within it, like the rhythm of a quiet breath. He no longer tried to snuff it out. Perhaps, he thought, a part of Elias had never left, and maybe a part of him had been taken by that same flame. Years later, a stranger came to Belchane, a young man with dark hair, saying he wished to rent the old plot of land by the woods. He introduced himself as Moreau, a distant relative of the candlemaker. People laughed. Belchane had long forgotten such stories. That first night, lights shone from the newly built wooden house. The glow was golden, gentle, and the air filled once again with that familiar sweet scent that drifted through the forest. They say that if you walk by the swamp that night, you can see a line of candles burning along the water's edge, their reflections trembling on the black surface of the lake. They do not fade, do not cool, and no wind can make them flicker. The light remains, as if Elias Moreau never truly left Belchane. No. Within the abandoned asylum, rusted wires bite into effigies suspended in endless decay. Their hollow forms sway gently, as if lulled by a breath that no longer belongs to the living. When night falls, the silence fractures. The figures convulse, their heads twisting in unison to a broken funereal rhythm. Jonah pulled the car to a halt on the gravel road, where withered trees stretched their skeletal branches toward the ashen sky. Before him loomed the asylum, a corpse of concrete and steel, windows shattered, walls peeled and veined with moss. Clara stepped out, her old camera slung over her shoulder, eyes caught between curiosity and dread. They had heard the stories whispered 100 times before, muffled cries echoing down the corridors, shadows dangling in broken windows, and always the same dreaded name, Dr. Harland. Jonah recounted to Clara the rumors of Harland's puppet therapy, drilling into skulls, wiring patients so their bodies could be made to dance. Many dismissed it as grotesque folklore, but others swore those experiments were the very reason the asylum was shuttered overnight. They pushed at the rust-eaten steel doors. Inga screamed, the sound dragging down the hallway like metal tearing bone. Inside, The stench of ancient disinfectant mingled with mildew, as though the air itself had been trapped since the 60s. Clara lifted her camera, snapping shot after shot. Rusted bed frames, suffocating corridors, padded cells gone rotten with mold. Jonah led the way, jotting notes. Clara said nothing, only pressed her shutter again, as though afraid the building's truth might vanish if she didn't capture it fast enough. Darkness thickened as daylight drained from the high windows, swallowing the halls whole. They stopped at the threshold of the great auditorium, where a collapsed wooden stage waited under a ceiling of rusting beams. Jonah felt his own footsteps strike too loud, the echoes bouncing back as though someone unseen matched his pace. Clara drew in a breath, her lens trembling as she tilted it toward the rafters. A sudden flash erupted. For the briefest instant, Jonah glimpsed something. Someone suspended high above. Then blackness reclaimed it. He craned his neck upward, heart pounding, while the air grew heavier, pressing on his chest. From somewhere deep within the asylum came a sound, a drawn-out metallic screech, like strings being tested in the dark. Clara's whisper cracked the silence. "We're not the only ones here." Jonah flicked on his flashlight, its narrow beam slicing through the dark. The light swept across the steel rafters above, and his breath caught. Shapes dangled from the beams. From a distance, they looked like patients in tattered hospital gowns, but their skin was gray, stiff, and lifeless as wood. Clara lowered her camera, hands trembling. She had managed one last shot before the flash revealed the horrific truth. One of the figures twitched, a hand jerking slightly, its neck bent at an unnatural angle as if yanked by invisible reins. Jonah swore every hollow eye socket had turned toward them. A chorus of metallic shrieks echoed overhead. The wires shuddered, pulling the hanging forms taut. Then they moved, not with the fluidity of the living, but stiff and jerky, like wooden marionettes forced to dance. Heads snapped in unison, arms lifted, legs curled, all to a rhythm only they could hear. Jonah staggered back against the wall, cold sweat breaking across his skin. He remembered the patient files he'd studied, rumors of skulls drilled open, wires fed into spines, bodies turned into living puppets. He had never believed it. Not until now. Clara clutched his arm, whispering, They're still being controlled, but by who? A heavier movement drew their eyes upward. From the shattered stage at the far end of the hall, something massive was rising. It was no longer a man, but a grotesque fusion of steel cables, rotting wood, and clattering joints. A face patched together, half man, half puppet, hung above a hulking body. Jonah knew instantly who it was, Dr. Harland, or what remained of him. The giant puppet bent low, its elongated arms sweeping wide. When it yanked a lever of wire, every dangling patient screamed in unison, a cacophony of cracking wood, grinding joints, and rusted hinges shrieking. The sound drove Clara to her knees, hands clamped over her ears. Jonah tried to haul her up, his eyes locked on the advancing horde. From the rafters, wires slithered downward like roots, snaking toward the floor, carrying the stench of rust and blood. There was only one choice left: flee deeper into the asylum's maze, or be hoisted up as another lifeless puppet. Jonah gripped Clara's hand hard and shouted, "Run!" Their footsteps thundered down the corridor. chased by the mad symphony of shrieking wires and the wooden convulsions of puppets dancing to their unseen master's tune. Wah! The narrow corridor stretched into infinity. Every step Jonah and Clara took echoing like a death knell. The trembling beam of the flashlight swept across half-open iron doors, their nameplates faded with time. Room 12, Special Therapy, Room 23, Behavioral Experiments. Wind hissed through cracks in the walls, sounding like the labored breaths of invisible patients. Jonah ran, forcing his lungs into rhythm. In his mind, the asylum's cryptic notes spun in a vicious cycle. Marionette therapy, restoring willpower through external control. He had never believed anyone could be cruel enough to attempt such things. But now the truth dangled on wires behind them, swaying in pursuit. Clara halted, pointing to a door left ajar. The faint red lettering still lingered. Operating room. "Jonah, we have to look," she gasped. "There might be answers inside." Jonah hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to keep running, but Clara's gaze, terrified yet unyielding, pulled him forward. Together, they shoved the door open. The operating room lay in darkness, save for a few dangling bulbs. One flickered to life with a sickly yellow glow, spotlighting the center table. There, shackled in place, lay the skeleton of a patient. Ribcage punctured, spine threaded with rusted wires. Clara lifted her camera and clicked. The flash burst across the back wall, unveiling a grotesque mosaic, dozens of sketches tacked side by side. Human bodies redrawn as puppets, their joints hinged with steel, every pencil stroke marking a drill wound. In the center hung the largest draft, its title scrawled in bold. Project Marionette, Total Control. Jonah's stomach twisted. He stepped closer, trembling fingers brushing the smeared ink. At the corner, a signature still lingered. Crooked, desperate, Harland, 1963. A sudden clang of metal jolted them. They spun around as the ceiling cracked, wires slithering downward to coil around the skeleton's limbs. The corpse jerked violently, then sat upright, jaw grinding with a splintering rasp. Dot. Clara screamed, while Jonah dragged her into the corner. The puppet corpse staggered forward, wires threaded through its eye sockets and chest, twitching with each unnatural step. Every footfall was the sound of wood splintering, every pull of the wires a discordant note. From the distance came a voice, low and rhythmic, like a conductor's count. 1, 2, 3. Jonah froze. Harland was orchestrating the entire asylum like a stage, each puppet moving to his cadence. He squeezed Clara's hand, eyes locked on the narrow exit across the room. "Run, when I say now." The puppet advanced, iron arm swinging down. Jonah zeised a rusted bar from the floor and swung upward, clashing against the blow. The screech of metal on metal shrieked through the room, sparks flying. In that instant, Clara dashed through the door, Jonah racing after her. They plunged into another corridor, leaving behind the relentless beat echoing through the asylum, louder, heavier, as if the building itself had a pulse. Jonah gasped for air, one truth burning inside him. Unless they destroyed the thing at the center of it all, they too would be dragged upward to dangle among the others, lifeless marionettes swaying in Harland's grip. Nisai, never way. The metallic shrieks of the wires still trailed them, but Jonah was beginning to notice a pattern. The cadence, 1, 2, 3, echoed from deep within the asylum, steady as a war drum. Each time the rhythm quickened, the puppets they encountered in the corridors twitched awake, turning in unison toward them. "Clara," he whispered, "the sound guides them. If we follow it, we'll find where Harland is pulling the strings." Clara nodded, her face pale, but a spark of resolve flickered in her eyes. She clutched the camera as if it were the last weapon she had. They descended a rotting spiral staircase. Dust coated the steps, clawed with endless gouges where wires had scraped across the stone. Jonah's hand skimmed a damp brick wall, the chill sinking into his skin like a parasite. As they dropped another level, the beat grew clearer, merging with the taut whine of wires pulled too tight, like a violin tuned past breaking. At the bottom stood a massive iron door. 2 words were carved into its surface: Control Ward. It hung slightly ajar, and through the crack spilled a red glow, pulsing with every count of the rhythm. Jonah drew a sharp breath and pushed it open. Inside lay a circular chamber, its ceiling a high dome from which hundreds of wires dangled like metallic roots. Each tether fed into colossal gears that churned with a grinding tempo. And at the very center, enthroned upon a towering chair, sat the husk of Dr. Harland. His body was no longer whole. Half his face had rotted away, yet his eyes remained open, milky and unblinking. Wires pierced his ribs, spine, even the skull itself, latching him into the machinery. Each turn of the gears yanked his body in violent spasms, and with every jolt came the thunder of puppets shifting above. Clara covered her mouth, choking back a scream. Jonah could not look away. This was no mere mad doctor. Harland had transformed himself into the mechanical heart of the asylum, a grotesque puppeteer wired to his own stage. Suddenly, Harland's eyes swiveled, locking onto them. A voice rolled out, not from his mouth, but from every wire, reverberating through the chamber as though the building itself spoke. "The final audience has arrived." The wires shuddered, glowing red-hot. From the fissures in the walls, the patients emerged, dozens of them, shuffling forward. Wooden hands and iron limbs scraped across the floor, closing the circle. Jonah dragged Clara back toward the far corner. His mind raced. He couldn't fight this army. But if Harland was the center, destroying the machinery might end it all. "Clara, listen," he hissed, urgent. "We have to break the main gear. If it stops, everything stops with it." Clara swallowed hard, then nodded. She clutched the camera tighter, ready to hurl it if it meant shattering steel. The puppets advanced, the circle closing in. Harland's laughter rattled through the dome, blending with the screech of grinding gears, a death orchestra swelling to crescendo. Jonah tightened his grip on the rusted iron bar, eyes locked on the glowing heart of the machine. There was only one chance: to strike before the wires closed in, before they too were bound, suspended among the asylum's collection of lifeless marionettes. Wah! Jonah tightened his grip on the iron rod, his heart pounding like a war drum. The puppets closed in, their hollow eyes gleaming, wires shrieking as they strained. At the center, Harland convulsed with each grinding turn of the gears, half his ruined face curled into a grotesque smile. "The audience must join the final act," his voice echoed through the dome, drawn out like a warped lullaby. With a roar, Jonah charged the machine. The iron rod slammed into the blazing gear, sparks bursting in a violent spray. The mechanism shuddered, wires slackened, and the puppets staggered in confusion. Clara screamed his name, her eyes wide with terror. But Harland would not yield. Wires lashed down from the rafters, coiling around Jonah's arm, wrenching him into the grinding maw. His body jolted violently, blood streaking across steel, mingling with the pulsing red glow. Clara rushed forward, clawing to free him, but Jonah's trembling hand pressed against her chest, stopping her. "Clara, run," he gasped, tears brimming in his eyes. "Let me end this." Her scream cracked the silence, but the wires twisted tighter, dragging Jonah into the core of the machine. With the last breath of his strength, he raised the rod and drove it down. The gear split apart with a thunderous crack. Light flared, then died. Silence swallowed the chamber. The puppets collapsed where they stood, strings cut, lifeless. Harlan's body crumbled with them, torn to rusted wire and rotted bone. Clara fell to her knees. Before her lay only shattered metal and a smear of blood, the last trace of Jonah. He had been consumed by the machine he destroyed. Beyond the asylum walls, dawn broke at last. Pale light crept through shattered windows, but in Clara's eyes it reflected nothing but a hollow void. The memory of Jonah and the shriek of steel wires would haunt her forever, like a play that refused to end, its curtain never falling. NPC.